As I think back over my training as a psychiatric nurse, I'm struck as much by the things we weren't taught as by the things we were. Information that now seems absolutely vital for mental health nurses to know never even warranted a mention, whilst hour upon hour was devoted to the almost religious doctrines of psychiatric classification. One omission was the relationship between hallucinations, delusions and illusions. Had this been made clear even once during our 3 years of pre-reg training, my fellow students and I might have had a fighting chance of dealing with psychosis. So might our patients. Instead, the 3 primary signs of psychosis, hallucinations, delusions and thought disorders, were always presented separately, as if they never had any relationship to each other. I want to show that they not only can be related, but that they almost inevitably must be in any problematic psychosis. I specify problematic because, let's face it, hallucinations without accompanying delusions or difficulties aren't going to cause any problems anyway. There are many people who experience hallucinations without having any problems, but they're not my patients. And they're probably not your service users either. To make the relationship clear, I need to start by talking briefly about hallucinations and also illusions. As we saw in the Psychosis 1 video, an hallucination is a sensory experience that's not actually caused by an external stimulus. To put it more simply, the smell you smell isn't real. The vision you see isn't actually the result of light hitting your retina, and no sound waves move through the air around you to produce the voice you hear. Hallucinations really are your senses playing tricks on you. Illusions are different. They're misinterpretations of sensory evidence, but they are based upon real external events. When we imagine a face in the shadows, it's not an hallucination, because there really is a shadow. We've just misinterpreted what we see. However, that doesn't mean that illusions don't matter. They very clearly do. So how does this relate to delusions? Well, the standard medical definition of a delusion is a fixed false belief not amenable to reason. A delusion is more than just a vague idea or a half-considered opinion. It's entrenched and hard to shift. Modern therapeutic protocols have shown that it's possible to reason around and through delusions, but that doesn't mean that it isn't difficult. That's precisely why delusions are so problematic, because they're so strong. Ask yourself a question. If a person lives in terror because of a delusional belief that the mafia plans to murder them, does it really make a difference to their quality of life if the belief is based on an illusion, they mistook a stranger for a hitman, or an hallucination, they heard the voice of a mafia boss ordering the hit? The terror is the same in either case, and the delusion will be equally hard to shift. Here's another question. When mental health professionals distinguish between hallucinations and illusions, can they always be sure? If I wasn't there and didn't see the face at the window, can I really distinguish between an hallucination, an illusion, or an actual face of a real stalker? The experience is the same, whatever the cause. The person is still frightened, and the belief is identical. Why does this matter? We can see that in both cases, illusion or hallucination, people's beliefs spring from their perception. For example, antipsychotic medication often creates problems with involuntary movement. People experiencing these side effects sometimes develop delusions of automatism, where they believe that their bodies are being controlled by others. It could be argued that this delusion might be dealt with very easily by making sure that the person concerned knew the true chemical cause of their problem. Then they wouldn't need to find alternative explanations. We make sense of the world partly by accessing the information that comes in through our senses, and partly by interpreting that information in the light of our expectations. If we know what to expect, we find it much easier to interpret what we see or hear. For example, this image may not be very clear to you, but to me, it's self-evident. I know exactly what this is because I can use memory and expectation to interpret the sense data coming in through my eyes. That's because I was there when the picture was taken. In fact, I'm the one who took it. Have a look at this. Now, let's go back to the original image. That's much easier to make sense of, isn't it? The image fits with what you already expect. It's so easy to make sense of the world when it fits our expectations. But what if those expectations are based upon flawed assumptions? What if our expectations are wrong, in other words? We'll interpret what we see or hear through the filter of our assumptions in just the same way, whether those assumptions are right or wrong. And they can be just as frightening, just as distressing, or for that matter, just as reassuring. This point will become important later when we discuss evidence and explanation finding with people experiencing delusions. A young man who sees images of demons in the embers of a campfire will be no less terrified than if he heard Satan's voice promising to steal his soul. A woman I once worked with experienced hallucinations of a monk walking around her flat. She interpreted this as a bad omen, foretelling disaster for herself or for her family. She was terrified. As it turned out, this hallucination was actually an illusion caused by shadows in her flat and a slight visual problem that needed ophthalmic treatment. Yet it was diagnosed as an hallucination simply because nobody had bothered to investigate other possibilities. These are all firm, distressing delusions based upon the evidence of the senses. The key is interpretation. This is also the key to dealing with them. If we can help people to reinterpret their sensory experiences, then we can help them to deal with many forms of delusions, but not with all of them. Not all delusions come from misinterpretation of sensory evidence, but an awful lot of them do. Enough to warrant proper understanding of the link before workers are let loose on delusional people. In future videos, we'll consider ways to help people overcome their delusions and distress. We'll look at the power of attribution and the meaning of recovery. We'll get into delusional mood and selective abstraction, as well as the principles of real-world experimentation, but they're for later. Next, we'll cover delusions that seem not to be based upon sensory evidence, but rather on a form of sequential reasoning, or even wishful thinking. These delusions may not be pleasant, but they do tend to serve a purpose. And often that's as much about self-preservation as it is about anything else. I'm Stuart Sorensen. You can find me at www.mindthecaretraining.com. Please feel free to go over there and have a look. But before you do, if you found this video useful or helpful in any way, please like and share it, and subscribe to the channel. These things really do help me an awful lot. And if you subscribe, who knows, it might help you too. Thank you very much.